Well, I'm thrilled now to be joined by Sky News Washington correspondent Annelise Nielsen. Annelise, thanks for coming on the program. Huge news just in the last few hours with Kash Patel, who has, after weeks, finally been confirmed as director of the FBI. Now, this is really huge. One of my sources in Washington told me that they said it felt like an earthquake had hit the J. Edgar Hoover building when the vote came down, and a lot of people involved in those Get Trump investigations, they must be pretty nervous right now.
And look, the theme of the moment is clearing everything out. And so that's very much going to be Kash Patel's orders from Donald Trump. We already know that there's been a push to get rid of some of the FBI agents and those affiliated who did all the investigating into the January 6th riot at the Capitol. And of course, anyone who was convicted has now been pardoned by Donald Trump. And what we are seeing in all this is they've done their strategy of flooding the zone. There's been so much going on that this hasn't necessarily captured the most attention, but it certainly has been divisive on Capitol Hill. It seemed like it was going to be more Republicans than just Collins and Murkowski who were going to oppose Kash Patel. But what was really critical in all this was the support of the Judiciary Chair, Chuck Grassley from Iowa. He's a very well-respected senator. He's known for being very popular in Iowa and a real grassroots senator. And he, from the get-go, said, I don't want to hear that he's unqualified. I want to hear that he's going to do the job. And that's really seems to be what got him over the line. And there is this kind of general sense that a number of agencies have become over-politicized, that this has become a problem where they're wielding the power and not the elected officials that are appointed to oversee them. So while people might not agree with necessarily what he wants to do, they do agree with the idea of reining it back, which has been a popular point to push until Donald Trump's given Elon so much power. And now it seems like that one's kind of finally coming back to roost.
But, I mean, you know, with the FBI, we saw so many direct investigations, crossfire hurricanes, scandal after scandal, where they essentially tried to manufacture evidence, let's be fair, about what happened against Trump around Russia conspiracies and things like that. And yet people on the left and Democrats are saying, oh no, Donald Trump is going to use the FBI to go after his own enemies. But it seems to me like what we're trying to do here, what he's trying to do, is restore trust in these agencies that became blatantly political when Republicans were in power or trying to seize power.
And look, this general sentiment is that Donald Trump's going the full throttle with all of this now because he's not going to have this opportunity with so much goodwill coming his way after such a convincing election result and just such a strong mandate. But I think there is some concern about it going too far the other way. If you were worried about Donald Trump coming in, this is only going to add fuel to the fire. But yes, absolutely, there's been concerns that they've had highly politicized investigations, that things that should have been investigated and weren't were covered up. And the other aspect to all this is that there was an assassination attempt against Donald Trump, and one where the bullet wasn't fired, but the guy got awfully close, and people still haven't got a lot of information about that. And they're concerned that the intelligence agencies haven't been going back to the core of their job, that they've been getting spread too thin, there's too much scope creep, and they need to go back to the basics, which is keeping people safe.
Absolutely. Hey, speaking of Donald Trump, of course, because that's what we're talking about tonight, he just had some nice comments to say.
We're talking about the next 4 years.
Australian. Well, but listen to this here. He's just had some comments about Australian golfer Adam Scott and about Australia. Have a listen to this.
Adam is, as Tiger will tell you, one of the greatest players and one of the great modern players. And he had 32 wins worldwide and winning the Masters also. And he's something very special and a great representative of golfers and athletes. Thank you very much, Adam. Even though he doesn't quite come from our country, he sort of does, right? He's here a lot. He comes from another nice place like Australia, right? And they've been very good, very, very good to us.
Some nice words about Australia from Donald Trump there. We've got this whole tariffs issue. Should we be reading anything into this, or is this just him being charming?
Look, it's him being charming, and we know that he has the propensity to be charming one day and pull the rug out from you the next day, and that's one of his favorite negotiating tactics. But anything's a win right now, and there are so many people having sleepless nights over tariffs right now that we are seen as being in the best position of what's broadly just a series of bad positions to be in. No one's going to win from tariffs being implemented, but for the Australians to just be in his mind for a general offhand comment as being good to us, for so many people, they're going to be reading into that, yeah, we give them a lot of money for their defence industrial base through AUKUS, but also we got that trade surplus that the US has with Australia, and so we're in a much better position, of course, with reciprocal tariffs, but when it comes to him trying to put in any punitive tariffs. So I know it seems like a stretch, especially if you don't live in the DC bubble, but I can tell you a lot of people are going to have a little bounce in their step tonight after hearing that, if they're the ones on the front line of the tariff.
Yeah, no, I have feeling the same sort of thing is happening in the Canberra bubble right about now, Annelise. Hey, I need to ask you, too, about Russia and Ukraine and Putin and these talks in Saudi Arabia. Now, everybody lost their minds when Donald Trump made that Truth Social post where he talked about Ukraine starting the war and taking out after Vladimir Zelensky and all of this. But now, behind the bluster, we are starting to see these talks happening between Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Has anything started to come out of this? And what's the reaction in Washington to all of this? Because, as you know, with Trump, there is, of course, the bluster, and then there's actually, what's happening behind the scenes.
Look, there's the bluster, but there's also just the well-acknowledged fact that Trump really doesn't like Ukraine for a lot of different reasons, including his first impeachment, including the fact that Hunter Biden was running around getting money for just God knows what. But when we're looking at what's happening here, quite genuinely, there's a lot of people horrified about this change in rhetoric, and it does seem to be kind of softening the US approach to Russia, and no one wants that. No one wants us to be pushed around by Russians depending on what they want. So I think there is the hope that there is more of a strategy to this than Donald Trump just being charmed by it. But from the general perspective here is that everyone does want this war to come to an end. They know that they can't keep putting money into it. They're all traumatized by Afghanistan. And there's concern that if they mishandle this, this could be Trump's Afghanistan. And so he's really putting the pressure in to get this great deal out of the rare earth minerals. But it is starting to be perceived as a bit of bullying of Ukraine. So what I think has to happen in all this is they have to come to something where there is this kind of acknowledgement of Ukrainian sovereignty. Otherwise, I do start to make the connection between the fact that we've had early polling of approval of Donald Trump, and it is starting to soften. He had a lot of wins early on. He did exactly what he promised for people on a lot of fronts, but those have been quick wins. We've got the border secured like we haven't seen in 4 years, with the number of illegal immigrants who've been blocked from coming, the number who've been sending back. America's seen in the box seat for just America's economic power being pushed back on the rest of the world. But Americans don't like looking like they're weak on the international stage. And that was one of the big issues with Biden at the end. And people don't want to see Trump do the same thing.
Yeah, fair enough, Annelise. Listen, thanks so much for your perspective. Really appreciate it, as always.
Thanks, James.